How had Qin Yuran died? There was no doubt that he'd been killed by Yang Yi. But how exactly did Yang Yi kill him without anyone noticing? This was exactly what everyone was puzzled and fearful about. They didn't know that Yang Yi had utilized the hidden sword and the sword control technique while he fought Qin Yuran. Yes, it was the hidden sword that caused Qin Yuran's expression to change violently at the end of the battle. Everything Yang Yi had done before that moment was actually an effort to numb Qin Yuran, cause Qin Yuran to become conceited, and then utilize the combination of the hidden sword and sword control technique to annihilate Qin Yuran with a single strike. At that time, they were truly too close to each other, and Qin Yuran was conceited as well. So, even if Qin Yuran had sensed danger at the last moment, it was still too late in the end. It could be said that the reason Qin Yuran had been killed by a single strike from Yang Yi was mostly because of his own carelessness. If he took Yang Yi to be an equal like how he had treated Yuan Tong, then even the combination of the hidden sword and sword control technique would probably be unable to kill him. Unfortunately, the only true opponent in his heart was Yuan Tong, and the others weren't worthy to be his opponent. Since the ancient times until now, how many genius experts had perished because of their own carelessness? In the end, the reason Yang Yi had diced Qin Yuran's corpse up was naturally for the sake of concealing the injury on Qin Yuran's body that was caused by the hidden sword. The combination of the hidden sword and sword control technique could be considered to be a trump card of his, so if he could conceal it, then he naturally had to. After all, he had even stronger enemies waiting for him. When Yang Yi walked down the arena, Li Si appeared on the arena. He glanced at Qin Yuran, who'd been sliced up into countless pieces, and then he shook his head lightly while a complicated expression flashed in his eyes. Qin Yuran was an outstanding disciple from the younger generation of the imperial household, and numerous people within the entire Grand Qin Empire looked favorably upon him. He was one of the few princes in the empire who had the strength to fight for the throne. The outsiders were unaware, but numerous ministers in the empire were watching the ascension rankings, and if Qin Yuran was able to ascend to the top 3 positions, then there would be countless clans and ministers that would support him. However, he'd perished during the ascension rankings. Moreover, he'd even died at the hands of someone that possessed no reputation before this. Li Si shook his head lightly, and then he glanced at Yang Yi, who was below the arena, before he said, "The Sword Sect's Yang Yi is victorious." There was no cheering or clapping in the surroundings, and there was only silence on the entire square. Because of the incident on Ascension Mountain Range, at least 90% of all the profounders on the square didn't have a good impression of Yang Yi, so it was impossible for them to cheer and clap for Yang Yi. Of course, Yang Yi didn't care about this. In his opinion, he only cared about the thoughts and actions of people that he cared about. As for the thoughts and opinions of outsiders, what the fuck did they have to do with him? Even though the spectators were still shocked and puzzled, the battles had to continue. In next to no time, 2 more people ascended the arena. Although a new round of battles had begun, numerous people were still talking about Yang Yi. On the wall of the imperial palace, Qin Yunzi gazed at Yang Yi, who resided on the square below, and said in a low voice, "This kid is slightly mysterious. Even though it's impossible for him to defeat you, you still shouldn't be careless. It's better to be safe than sorry." Yuan Tong, who stood behind Qin Yunzi, smiled lightly and said, "Don't worry, Elder Yun. The stronger he is, the happier I am. I originally looked favorably upon Qin Yuran, but I never expected that he would actually be such a useless piece of trash. First, he was heavily injured by an unknown person. Then he even died at Yang Ye's hands. How disappointing." Qin Yunzi shook his head lightly and said, "It's becoming more and more difficult to see through this kid, Yang Yi. Even though I don't believe he can be a match for you, but you should be careful. Securing your position as the martial god isn't just a personal matter of yours. It's also related to the karmic luck of my origin school for the next few hundred years. You ought to be clearly aware that you're only allowed to succeed, and failure is not an option." Yuan Tong nodded lightly and didn't say anything. Merely a wisp of a cold smile suffused the corners of his mouth. In the younger generation of the entire Southern Territory, besides that mysterious dark beast called Luo Shui from the Dark Beast Empire who was able to make him feel slightly fearful, did any other human or dark beast possess the qualifications to be his opponent? Sword intent? Perhaps it was terrifying to others, but in Yuan Tong's opinion, mere first-level sword intent was truly slightly insufficient. On the other side, Kaifeng gazed at one Renyu who stood in front of her, and then she said in a low voice, "Little you, I know that there's some relationship between you and Yang Ye's mother, but you ought to be clearly aware what Yang Yi, who has comprehended sword intent, represents to my flower palace. If he's allowed to grow, then he'll definitely become a formidable enemy of my flower palace. So, if you encounter him during the following battles of the competition, you must remember not to hold back. Understand." She hadn't aroused a feeling of danger when Yang Yi killed Li Xianjun. However, she was unable to maintain her calm when Yang Yi killed Qin Yuran. Qin Yuran was an extraordinary genius who was painstakingly fostered by the Grand Qin Empire, but he'd still perished at Yang Ye's hands as well. Moreover, she was finding it more and more difficult to see through Yang Yi. Her intuition told her that she absolutely couldn't allow Yang Yi to grow. Otherwise, he would definitely be an enormous threat and problem for the Flower Palace in the future. One Renyu glanced at Kaifeng before she nodded. On the other side of the wall, Yu Heng gazed at Yang Yi, who stood amongst the crowd below, and he said in a low voice, "I never expected that even Qin Yuran would perish at his hands. We've been constantly underestimating him since the beginning. If he received Martial Uncle Zue's guidance for a few years, then with his natural talent, his accomplishments would definitely not be beneath Lin Shuran." Yu Heng had never imagined that Yang Yi would actually be able to kill Qin Yuran. If he knew that Yang Yi possessed such strength and potential, then he wouldn't have allowed Yang Yi to leave the Sword Sect, even if the Sword Sect had to offend the Flower Palace and Origin School. Unfortunately, it was too late now. Fortunately, the Sword Sect still had Murong Yao and Lin Shuran. Su Qingshi, who stood behind Yu Heng, didn't say anything. Since she'd met Yang Yi, the changes he displayed had truly shocked her. If the Sword Sect fostered Yang Yi with all its might, then he would even be able to fight for supremacy with Yuan Tong. Unfortunately, Yang Yi hadn't even displayed his natural talent when the Sword Sect had already abandoned him. Of course, she didn't really care about all of that now, and she was even more concerned about Yang Ye's fate after the Ascension rankings came to an end. Once the Ascension rankings come to an end, how would Yang Yi, who has lost the protection of the Talisman Masters Association and Sword Sect, be able to survive before the Ghost Sect, Origin School, and Flower Palace? Every time she thought about this, a wisp of worry would appear on Su Qingshi's exquisite and gorgeous face. At this moment, Lin Shuran's expression was rather unsightly, because he hadn't imagined that Qin Yuran had actually perished at Yang Ye's hands. He'd personally experienced Qin Yuran's strength, and it was exactly the reason why his expression was slightly unsightly right now, because he seemed to have slightly underestimated Yang Yi since the beginning. Lin Shuran really was a genius that Taoist Zue had chosen, but others didn't know that he wasn't the only one. To put it in simpler terms, he could be eliminated at any moment. His opponent during the Ascension rankings wasn't Yuan Tong or the two women from the two palaces. It was Yang Yi. If his ranking was below Yang Yi, then he would be abandoned by Taoist Zue, and once he lost the support and ability to rely on such an extraordinary expert, his future accomplishments would be limited even if he'd comprehended sword intent. Moreover, could anyone resist the temptation of being a figure that possessed real power in the Sword Sect in the future? So only one of them could remain alive. The countless people in the surroundings had various thoughts after witnessing Yang Yi kill Qin Yuran. However, all of this was meaningless to Yang Yi. Yang Yi knew the situation that he was in, and it was extremely easy for those powers to kill Yang Yi since he'd lost the protection of the Talisman Masters Association. Flee? What a joke! If he fled now, he would die even sooner. Moreover, if he fled, then what about his mother? So, fleeing was impossible. Since he couldn't flee, then he could only stay here and fight. Even though he was very unwilling and very displeased, Yang Yi knew that he had to work hard to prove his value, because only by proving his own value would his mother have a chance at surviving. In next to no time, another day had passed, and 8 of the remaining 16 participants had been eliminated. At this moment, only 8 profounders remained on the arena, and they were the top 8. To the surprise of everyone, besides Yuan Tong, Wan Renyu, Leng Xinran, Yang Yi, and Lin Shuran, The Bright Moon Sect's Hao Ming, who everyone had overlooked until now, had actually advanced into the top 8 as well. The Bright Moon Sect hadn't declined like the Sword Sect, but it had always kept a very low profile. Not only did the sect keep a low profile, even its disciples were the same. So, most people had unconsciously forgotten Hao Ming. Right, Murong Yao had stopped at the top 16. One could only say that her luck was slightly bad because she encountered Lang Xinran from the Snow Palace. Murong Yao's strength was extremely formidable, but she'd lost to Lang Xinran in the end. However, Murong Yao was already very satisfied with being able to be ranked in the top 15, and the Sword Sect was extremely satisfied as well. Besides the members of the 6 great powers, there were 2 more profounders who'd advanced into the top 8. One was a disciple of the Lu clan called Lu Feng, and the other was an independent cultivator called Bai He. Both of them were extremely strong. Of course, if the Ghost Sect's Li Xianjun and the Imperial Academy's Qin Yuran hadn't perished, then they would absolutely have no chance of entering the top 8. In the opinion of the spectators in the surroundings, the 2 of them would be unable to advance further after entering the top 8. After all, the other 6 profounders in the top 8 possessed strengths that could be described as terrifying. Once it came to the top 8, the battles would naturally become more and more intense because not a single one of them was a weakling. Of course, the most popular amongst them was still Yuan Tong. Because during the battles of the top 16, Yuan Tong had still finished his opponent with a single attack. In other words, since the ranking battles had begun, Yuan Tong had merely executed a single attack during every single battle. Presently, so long as Yuan Tong ascended the arena, then countless people below the arena would shout loudly, "One hit! One hit!" Exactly how strong was Yuan Tong's attack? The spectators would probably only be able to obtain a rough understanding of it if he fought Wan Renyu from the Flower Palace or Lang Xinran from the Snow Palace. The Flower Palace's Wan Renyu against the Sword Sect's Yang Yi. On the arena, Li Si announced in a flat voice, "Haha! Yang Yi is finally going to be finished. Let's see how he continues acting arrogantly now that he has encountered the Flower Palace's Wan Renyu." Exactly. If he encountered Wan Renyu or Lang Xinran earlier, then he would have been finished a long time ago. How could he have possibly possessed the chance to enter the top 8? He really is a lucky bastard. Don't get happy too earlier. What if he defeats Wan Renyu? After all, Qin Yuran died at his hands. When they heard these words, some of the profounders in the surroundings had shut their mouths. But in next to no time, some started speaking again. Humph. Although Qin Yuran was an extraordinary figure, but I never expected that he wouldn't live up to his reputation. He was actually injured by an independent cultivator and even died at Xianxia's hands. It looks to me like he wasn't strong at all, and his reputation was just a product of boasting. Exactly. After all, Yang Yi was blasted back with a single punch from Yuan Tong on Ascension Mountain Range. But Qin Yuran actually died at Xianxia's hand. To think he had the guts to say that his opponent was Yuan Tong. It looks to me like he can't even compare to Yuan Tong at all. In next to no time, the profounders in the surroundings had stopped trashing Yang Yi, and they started to trash Qin Yuran instead. Of course, they were naturally trashing Qin Yuran in order to trash Yang Yi. Amidst the sounds of animated discussion in the surroundings, Yang Yi and Wan Renyu ascended the arena. "You really surprised everyone." Wan Renyu gazed at Yang Yi while she spoke in a flat tone. Indeed, Yang Ye's display had caused countless people to feel surprised. Because since the very beginning, no one had thought that Yang Yi would be able to come this far. "I think that the Flower Palace has already instructed you to eliminate me, right?" asked Yang Yi. Wan Renyu didn't hide it from him and nodded before she said, "The greater the potential you display is, the greater the palace's resolution to kill you would be. Moreover, this competition is the best time to kill you." Yang Yi shook his head slowly and said, "You can't kill me. Out of consideration for the possibility that you know my mother, admit defeat, all right?" "Do you think it's possible?" said Wan Renyu in a cold voice. Yang Yi nodded lightly and said, "Then attack." Wan Renyu flipped her palm and a crystal blue ring appeared in her hand. And with a wave of her hand, it whistled sharply as it tore through the sky and shot towards Yang Yi like a bolt of lightning. When he saw it shook towards him, Yang Yi just drew his sword and slashed. Bang! The sound of metal colliding rumbled through the area, and then the crystal blue ring shot backward towards Unrivaled at a speed that was even faster than before. Unrivaled stretched her hand forward and made a grasping motion. The crystal blue ring's speed instantly slowed down, and when it arrived before her, it simply seemed like Yang Yi had tossed it to her. If you want to kill me, then stop pulling your punches. Yang Yi spoke indifferently as he gazed at her. As you wish. As soon as she finished speaking, Unrivaled flicked with her finger, and the crystal blue ring shot out like a bolt of lightning. It expanded explosively in midair and instantly transformed into an enormous ring the size of the arena, and then it started revolving in midair at high speeds. In the next moment, Unrivaled flicked with her finger once more, and she shouted softly towards Yang Yi. Go! As soon as her voice resounded in the air, the enormous crystal blue ring shot down towards Yang Yi at a speed that wasn't visible to the eye. Yang Yi's expression was slightly solemn when he saw it shoot down towards him. He'd experienced the might of this ring that day, and it was impossible to escape and could only be resisted by force. When he thought up to here, the profound energy within Yang Yi's body surged into the violet spirit sword in his hand, and as his profound energy surged ceaselessly into it, a strand of dazzling golden light erupted from it. When the crystal blue ring had arrived less than 10 inches away from him, a wisp of a ferocious expression flashed in Yang Yi's eyes, and then he drew his sword and slashed. Under the enhancement provided by his golden profound energy and the instantaneous eruption of energy created by the Heavenren sword drawing technique, the strength carried by this strike of Yang Yi's had arrived at an extremely terrifying degree. Everywhere violet spirit passed, a vacuum formed around it, and an extremely obvious mark of the sword appeared in the air. It was extraordinarily striking. Clang! An enormous clang resounded from the arena. This time, the crystal blue ring wasn't blasted flying. On the contrary, the terrifying might that was emanated from the crystal blue ring had caused Yang Yi to be shaken to the point his feet scraped the ground as he retreated explosively, and he finally stopped when he arrived at the edge of the arena. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed when he lowered his head and saw his palm that had split open. With the overall strength he possessed, he was actually unable to block the crystal blue ring, and its strength had slightly exceeded his expectations. Bring forth your true strength, otherwise, just stop here. As she gazed at Yang Yi, Unrivaled spoke indifferently. Yang Yi took a deep breath when he heard this, and then he strode slowly towards Unrivaled. After he'd taken 2 steps forward, an invisible force surged towards Unrivaled like tidewater. At the same time, a clear and melodious howl resounded once more from the violet spirit sword in Yang Yi's hand. On the other hand, all those who possessed swords beneath the arena had once again felt as if their swords had received some sort of summons. Their swords were trembling violently and seemed to be on the verge of struggling free from their control. Second-level sword intent. A large expanse of gasps resounded throughout the surroundings. In the beginning, when Yang Yi killed Xianxia, he'd merely revealed first-level sword intent and utilized a mysterious technique to kill Xianxia. So, all of them felt that Xianxia was weak and wasn't even able to resist Yang Yi's first-level sword intent. Later on, when Yang Yi killed Qin Yuran, he'd utilized a mysterious technique again. So, everyone was actually fearful of Yang Yi's mysterious technique and not the strength that Yang Yi revealed. Yet now, all of them had never imagined that Yang Yi had actually attained second-level sword intent. Second-level sword intent before the age of 20, such natural talent was superior to over 90% of the people in the surroundings. At this moment, even those that didn't have a good impression of Yang Yi had no choice but to admit that perhaps Yang Yi hadn't relied on luck to enter the top 8. When she saw Yang Yi's second-level sword intent, Kai Feng's face instantly sank, and the killing intent in her eyes seemed material. Second-level sword intent before the age of 20. Such natural talent wasn't inferior to Unrivaled at all. So, if Yang Yi was allowed to continue growing, then she could imagine that the Flower Palace would definitely have another terrifying enemy in a few hundred years from now. Yang Yi must die. This was what Kai Feng thought at this moment. Interesting, truly interesting. On the other side, Yuan Tong, who stood by Qing Yunzi's side, suddenly started laughing, and he said, I really underestimated this Yang Yi in the past. I never expected that he has actually comprehended second-level sword intent, and it's even more surprising that he was able to avoid exposing it until now. Did he intend to shock everyone with a single brilliant move? Haha! Second-level sword intent. His natural talent really isn't bad. Qing Yunzi spoke indifferently. Unfortunately, such a good seedling is going to die on the arena in the end. He deserves death. Yuan Tong restrained the smile on his face and said, I was originally wondering if Yuan Yi had died at his hands, or those dark beasts of the Grand Myriad Mountains. Now it would seem like Yuan Yi was most probably killed by him. Yuan Yi can't die for nothing, so I'll personally send him to see Yuan Yi. Qing Yunzi nodded lightly and said, Of course. How could a member of my origin school be killed just like that? On the arena, as she sensed herself being suppressed and restrained, Wenren gazed at Yang Yi and said, Have you finally stopped pulling your punches? As soon as she finished speaking, a terrifying, imposing aura surged explosively from her, and it resisted Yang Ye's sword intent. Even she had no choice but to be cautious against the suppression and restraint of sword intent. Fortunately, Yang Ye's sword intent was merely at the second level, so it wasn't able to suppress and restrain her too much. With a gesture of her right hand, the crystal blue ring shot out once more. It shook slightly in midair, and then it instantly transformed into countless fist-sized rings that enveloped down towards Yang Yi like a dense expanse of raindrops. When he saw the dense expanse of crystal blue rings shooting down towards him, Yang Yi ceaselessly waved about the violet spirit sword in his hand. In an instant, countless golden strands of sword chi that contained sword intent shot out explosively from the tip of violet spirit. The sword chi formed from Yang Ye's golden profound energy was already extremely formidable. Now that they were boosted by second-level sword intent, the sword chi Yang Yi executed right now had become extremely swift and fierce. An extremely brilliant scene had appeared on the arena. Countless crystal blue rings and innumerable strands of golden sword chi collided incessantly with each other. And then they ceaselessly dispersed into the air while explosions resounded without end. The entire arena was heavily damaged and on the verge of collapse from the damage caused by the strands of golden sword chi and the crystal blue rings. It seemed as if the arena would crumble at any moment. When they witnessed the terrifying scene on the arena, some of the profounders who were close to the arena had moved a certain distance backward. Regardless of whether it was the golden strands of sword chi or the crystal blue rings, both weren't attacks that they could resist, and they didn't want to suffer misfortune. Bang! Suddenly, an enormous bang that could shake the world resounded on the arena. After that, the entire arena suddenly started trembling violently. In the next moment, the enormous arena rumbled as it collapsed before the astounded gazes of countless profounders in the surroundings, causing dust and dirt to instantly suffuse the air. Bang! Bang! While the profounders in the surroundings still hadn't recovered from their shock, two figures had suddenly leaped up from the ruins of the arena. They were none other than Yang Yi and Wenren. At this moment, countless fist-sized crystal blue rings were spinning around Wenren at high speeds. The crystal blue rings weren't spinning in a chaotic and disorderly manner, and they were spinning at high speeds according to a strange trajectory. It was like an invisible force filled the surroundings around Wenren, and it caused the ground and rocks there to be ceaselessly crushed into powder. Yang Yi had the violet spirit sword in his hand as he stood in front of her, and strands of light flickered ceaselessly on it. At a certain moment in time, Yang Yi suddenly moved, and his figure vanished on the spot and left an afterimage behind as he shot explosively towards Wenren. With a slash of the violet spirit sword in his hand, a strand of golden sword chi shot explosively towards Wenren while he followed closely behind it. Wenren's expression remained unchanged when she saw the strand of golden sword chi shoot explosively towards her, and with a light flick of her slender finger, a ring instantly shot forward like a bolt of lightning. Bang! Along with a sound of explosion, the ring and the golden sword chi instantly dispersed in the air, and then a wave of air swept towards the surroundings. During this period of time, Yang Yi arrived in front of Wenren, and with a twist of his wrists, Violet spirit swept forward horizontally. Hiss! Because the strength behind the sword was too formidable, the air was completely torn into pieces wherever it passed, while hissing that caused the scalps of the spectators to tingle instantly resounded from the arena. Yu's expression became slightly solemn when she sensed the terrifying strength contained within the violet spirit sword. She'd experienced Xianxia's physical strength in the past, and she knew that she would definitely suffer a disadvantage if she went head-on against it. So, when she thought up to here, Yu formed a strange seal with her hand, and then her entire body shook abruptly. After that, a bang resounded as she transformed into countless flower petals that erupted towards the surroundings. Xianxia's expression changed at the instant that Yu had suddenly vanished before him, and he didn't hesitate at all to turn around while raising his sword up horizontally to block an impending attack. Bang! A crystal blue ring was instantly blasted flying by this strike from Xianxia. After that, an extremely strange scene appeared on the arena. Countless crystal blue rings swept ceaselessly towards Xianxia from all directions in an extremely shocking manner. As for Xianxia himself, even though he hadn't become flustered because of this, anyone with a discerning gaze was able to notice that it was slightly strenuous for Xianxia right now. As she gazed at Xianxia, who seemed to be strenuously resisting the crystal blue rings on the ruins below, a wisp of worry arose once more in the eyes of Xianxia, who stood on the wall of the imperial palace. The crystal blue ring was a mid-grade Earth-rank dark treasure, and it was even one that possessed a natural weapon spirit. Coupled with the shocking combat technique that Yu was utilizing right now, the might it revealed was something that even some king-rank experts were unable to resist. Violet spirit was once a Dao artifact, but its weapon spirit was in deep slumber, and coupled with the fact that it was only half of its original self, how could it resist that crystal blue ring? On the other side, the Flower Palace's Kaifeng revealed a smile for the first time. Even she had to admit that Xianxia's strength was really good for his age. But so what? As the most outstanding disciple of the Flower Palace's younger generation, no matter if it was cultivation techniques, combat techniques, and the guidance she received in all aspects, the Flower Palace had given her the best. But what about Xianxia? So, Xianxia was bound to die in this battle. It wasn't just Kaifeng who had such thoughts. Lin Xiran, who was watching the battle from below, thought in the same way. Needless to say, the strength Xianxia revealed now had caused him to feel threatened. Of course, it was merely a slight threat. Even if Xianxia revealed second-level sword intent, Lin Xiran was still confident in his ability to defeat Xianxia. Of course, it couldn't be any better if Xianxia died at Yu's hands. Everyone felt that Xianxia would definitely lose, but Yu, who was fighting on the ruins of the arena, didn't think in that way. On that day, while they were on Ascension Mountain Range, she'd witnessed Xianxia's strange technique of sword control. If Xianxia utilized that technique, then dealing with this trouble before him would be extremely easy. However, even up until this very moment, Xianxia hadn't utilized it, and this caused Yu to be extremely puzzled. She shook her head and stopped thinking about this, and then she stretched out her fair hand and shouted lightly towards Xianxia. Trap! As soon as she finished speaking, the crystal blue rings instantly started revolving at high speeds. In the next moment, all of them enveloped down towards Xianxia at a speed that was too fast for the eye to catch. They instantly surrounded Xianxia. When they witnessed this scene, countless spectators in the surroundings instantly shook their heads, while many even started discussing once more. Xianxia is finally going to lose. I knew it. Once he loses the assistance of that mysterious king-rank dark beast, then he's a complete weakling when he encounters a true expert. Alas, I never expected that Xianxia, who has already comprehended second-level sword intent, would lose to Yu. She really deserves to be the most outstanding disciple of the Flower Palace's younger generation. I think that if Xianxia hadn't comprehended sword intent, then he would probably be unable to resist 3 moves of hers. Right? 3 moves? You think too highly of him. If he wasn't a lucky bastard that comprehended sword intent, then not to mention 3 moves, he wouldn't even be able to resist a single move of hers. On the ruins of the arena, Yu gazed at Xianxia, who was surrounded by countless crystal blue rings, and then she shook her head lightly while a wisp of disappointment flashed in her eyes. Clang! Right at this moment, a resounded howl of the sword suddenly resounded from the center of the encirclement created by the crystal blue rings, and it caused the countless spectators in the surroundings to be stunned. Under the astounded gazes of countless spectators in the surroundings, a golden sword light lit up from amidst the crystal blue rings. In the next moment, all of them heard an enormous bang resound as those crystal blue rings that surrounded Yang Yi were blasted flying. After that, they saw a figure shoot explosively towards Wenren. When she witnessed this scene, Su Qingshi immediately heaved a sigh of relief, and her frown had eased up. Conversely, Kai Feng frowned instead, and her face had turned gloomy. Yang Yi had merely utilized less than a breath of time to traverse a distance of over 30 m. A wisp of a ruthless expression flashed in his eyes as he gazed at Wenren who stood right before him, and the profound energy within his body surged violently into violet spirit before he drew it and swung it swiftly. A wisp of surprise flashed in Wenren's eyes when she saw Yang Yi launch an assault against her. How did he break through the encirclement of those crystal blue rings? Even though she was extremely puzzled, she didn't have the time to think about it now because Yang Yi had launched a ferocious attack against her. Just like before, Wenren's figure shook and transformed into countless flower petals as she vanished on the spot, and then she appeared on Yang Ye's left. After that, a ring in her hand slashed towards Yang Ye's neck. Yang Yi seemed to have expected this, and he dodged to the side as soon as she vanished, and then violet spirit slashed horizontally towards his left in an extremely natural manner. At this moment, it seemed like Wenren had moved on her own accord to be slashed by Yang Ye's sword. Wenren's expression changed, and she even revealed shock in her eyes. How did he grasp the trajectory of my movements? She didn't have the time to think it through before she executed that mysterious movement technique and vanished on the spot again. After that, she appeared on Yang Ye's right. However, right when she appeared on Yang Ye's right, Yang Ye's sword that was slashing towards the left had suddenly started slashing towards the right, and it was moving towards the precise location where Wenren had appeared right now. When they witnessed this scene, the expressions of all the great figures on the walls of the imperial palace had changed. Even Yuan Tong, who'd always been indifferent and composed, couldn't help but reveal a wisp of a solemn and puzzled expression. The movement technique Wenren executed was naturally filled with flaws when they looked at it, and with the strengths and discerning ability they possessed, they were naturally able to easily deal with this mysterious movement technique. But how could Yang Yi do the same? After all, Yang Yi was merely at the first heaven realm now. He can see through the flaws of an earth rank technique while at the first heaven realm? This isn't logical no matter what. But if Yang Yi hadn't seen through the flaws of this earth rank technique, then how was he able to constantly seize the initiative to pin Wenren down? This kid is really mysterious. As he gazed at Yang Yi, Li Si frowned as he spoke in a low voice. Bai Qi nodded lightly at his side and said, if he was able to accomplish this by relying on his own combat experience, then isn't it a little too terrifying? But it seems to be impossible. If it was Yuan Tong, then it might be possible. After all, Yuan Tong has comprehended the battle intent of legend. However, if it isn't that, then how was he able to accomplish this? I originally thought that second-level sword intent was his limit. But now it would seem like he still hasn't exposed his true strength and trump cards even until this very moment. Alas, the more shocking the strength and potential he reveals are, the more impossible it would be for Tihi Flower Palace, Ghost Sect, and Origin School to let him live. What a pity! Li Si shook his head slowly as he spoke. But what if he obtains the first on the Ascension rankings? Bai Qi asked this same question once more. Then the Sword Sect, the Talisman Masters Association, and the two of us were all blind. Li Si gazed at Yang Yi as he spoke in a light voice. On the ruins of the arena, Yang Yi and Wenren had split apart. Wenren gazed at him as she said in a low voice, how did you do that? Yang Yi shook his head and said, no comment. If you still want to kill me, then utilize that Dao artifact that the rumors say you possess. Wenren fell silent. After a short while, she gazed at Yang Yi and said, how confident are you in your ability to obtain the first? Yang Yi was stunned, and then he said with a puzzled tone, what do you mean? Answer me. When he noticed the serious expression on her face, Yang Yi hesitated for a moment before he said, 50%. Wenren Yu's eyelids twitched when she heard this. 50% confidence. Isn't this fellow a little too confident? What did 50% confidence represent? It represented that Yang Yi was confident in his ability to be on par with Yuan Tong. Where did he get such confidence from? Wenren Yu fell silent once more. After a short while, she glanced at Yang Yi and said, I believe you. I hope you truly have 50% confidence to win. As soon as she finished speaking those words, she turned around to look at Li Si, who stood in the distance, and said, I admit defeat. An uproar erupted in the surroundings when they heard Wenren Yu. The Flower Palace's Wenren Yu admitted defeat? Admitted defeat? What is the meaning of this? All the profounders in the surroundings were slightly puzzled by Wenren Yu's actions. Even Yang Yi was slightly dazed at this moment. He was able to sense that Wenren Yu hadn't utilized her full strength yet. If she utilized her full strength, then he would definitely fall into an intense battle with her. But he'd never imagined that Wenren Yu would actually admit defeat. At the moment that Wenren Yu admitted defeat, Kai Feng's expression instantly turned horrifyingly gloomy. She'd been constantly waiting for Wenren Yu to utilize her true trump card. In Kai Feng's opinion, even if Yang Yi had suddenly become quite mysterious, Yang Yi would definitely die once Wenren Yu utilized her true trump card. However, she'd never imagined that Wenren Yu would directly admit defeat. This also caused her to become overwhelmed with rage to the point of suffering chi deviation. Why did Wenren Yu admit defeat? Besides Wenren Yu herself, there was probably no one else who knew the answer. Wenren Yu had just left the arena when Kai Feng appeared by her side, and Kai Feng asked in a furious voice, Why did you do that? Wenren Yu glanced at Kai Feng before she said, I'm willing to accept the punishment of the palace. Kai Feng was infuriated when she heard this, and she said with rage, The punishment of the palace? Little Shui, truthfully speaking, I'm not angry that you let Yang Yi live because he would definitely be unable to escape death once the ascension rankings came to an end. I'm angry because you gave up on the competition. With your strength, you're entirely capable of seizing the top 3. Could it be that you're not aware that the benefits the palace receives increases along with your ranking? Wenren Yu remained silent and didn't say a single word. This caused Kai Feng to be even more furious, but she was helpless towards this. Even though Wenren Yu was merely an inner court disciple at the first heaven realm, Wenren Yu's status in the Flower Palace was even higher than Kai Feng, who was an elder of the sect, because she was the inner court disciple who possessed the greatest natural talent and potential. Even though everyone was still puzzled, the competition still continued. With a colossus like the Grand Qin Empire presiding over the competition, a new arena had appeared once more on the square in less than 2 hours of time. In next to no time, everyone stopped thinking about why Wenren Yu had admitted defeat because Yuan Tong had ascended the arena. Yuan Tong's opponent was an independent cultivator called Bai He. Bai He had a slightly rugged appearance, and his figure was robust. If he hadn't passed Li Si's test, then the spectators might even think that he was over 30 years of age now. When he heard his opponent was Yuan Tong, Bai He didn't reveal any sorrow on his face, and he withdrew a large saber that had a demon's head carved on it. He supported the saber on his shoulder, and then he walked up the arena. Under the gazes of anticipation that shot over from the surroundings, Yuan Tong appeared on the arena as well. At the moment Yuan Tong's figure appeared there, the crowd in the surroundings instantly started seething with excitement. Yuan Tong. 1 hit. Yuan Tong. 1 hit. 1 hit. Since Yuan Tong had started ascending the arena until now, not a single one of his opponents could withstand a single strike of his. Now, the spectators wanted to witness such a legend once more. Yuan Tong grinned as he gazed at the spectator, and then he looked at Bai He, who supported the large saber on his shoulder. Yuan Tong placed his hands behind his back, and a smile remained on his face, causing him to fully reveal the elegant demeanor of an expert. No one said that Yuan Tong was trying to act cool because Yuan Tong possessed the strength for that. Even though it displeased many people, they couldn't do anything about it. When Li Si announced the beginning of the battle, the gazes of everyone moved onto Bai He. Now, all of them wanted to see if Bai He would be able to withstand a single attack from Yuan Tong. At this moment, Bai He felt quite pressured. Of course, anyone who became Yuan Tong's opponent would feel pressured. However, he had to fight even if he felt pressured. Even if he admitted defeat, he had to admit defeat after exchanging at least 2 blows with Yuan Tong. Otherwise, it would truly be a humiliation for him. Bai He took a deep breath and slowly raised the saber from his shoulder. He held it with both hands before the profound energy within his body surged madly into it, and then a violent gale suddenly appeared around Bai He's body, causing the hard ground where Bai He stood started to crack inch by inch. Numerous spectators in the surroundings were shocked when they witnessed this scene, and they said to themselves, Bai He didn't rely solely on luck to enter the top 8, and he does possess some strength. However, it's truly a bit too weak in front of Yuan Tong. Yuan Tong, who stood opposite Bai He, still had an indifferent expression and didn't show any intention to attack. He allowed Bai He to accumulate strength. At a certain moment in time, a wisp of a ferocious expression flashed in Bai He's eyes, and then he held the large saber with both hands as he swiftly chopped it downward towards Yuan Tong. In an instant, a white-colored strand of light that was over 10 m long shot out explosively from the tip of the saber. Because the energy contained within this saber light was too terrifying, a rift that was around 0.5 m wide and a few meters deep had extended from Bai He's feet to Yuan Tong. Yuan Tong finally moved when the terrifying saber light had arrived less than 1.5 m away from him. He took a step forward before he clenched his right hand tightly into a fist, and then he smashed his fist at the saber light. In an instant, a fist that was formed from energy shot out explosively. Under the gazes of anticipation that came from the surroundings, the fist and the saber light collided with each other in midair. Bang! An enormous bang rumbled and resounded on the arena, and then the fist formed from energy seemed like a sharp sword that pierced into rotten wood as it instantly blasted the saber light into dispersal. After that, it didn't slow down at all as it arrived in front of Bai He before smashing onto Bai He's chest. Under the astounded gazes of the spectators in the surroundings, Bai He was blasted flying. Or it should be said that he was directly blasted flying out of the arena. After a short moment of being stunned, the crowd started shouting madly at Yuan Tong, who stood on the arena. Yuan Tong! Yuan Tong! One hit! One hit! Martial God! Martial God! Countless voices converged together and shook the 9 heavens. On the other hand, the remaining participants of the Ascension rankings had solemn expressions on their faces. Yuan Tong's strength could really be described as being unfathomable, and they felt that Yuan Tong was really being a bully by participating in the Ascension rankings while possessing such strength. Yuan Tong grinned towards the spectators below, and then he leaped off the arena and returned to where he stood before the battle. If it wasn't for his path to becoming the martial god, he wouldn't participate in the Ascension rankings because the Ascension rankings was like a game to him. It was truly not challenging at all. After Yuan Tong descended the arena, Li Si appeared on it once more. He gazed at the crowd that was cheering and seething with excitement, and his expression was slightly gloomy. If Yuan Tong really becomes the martial god, then with his power and influence, a single call from him would definitely be able to make countless profounders follow him in the future. That's extremely harmful to the empire. When he thought about such a scene, Li Si couldn't help but sigh lightly. It would be great if someone is able to stop Yuan Tong now. But is that even possible? Based on the strength Yuan Tong has revealed now, then not to mention these first Heaven Realm profounders here, even King Realm experts might not be able to defeat him. Perhaps only a Spirit Realm expert would be able to stop him. Actually, it wasn't just Li Si who wanted to eliminate Yuan Tong. The other powers that were hostile to the Origin School wanted to do so as well. It was even to the extent that even the Flower Palace and Snow Palace had such intentions. Because regardless of which power it was, all of them didn't want to see the Origin School rise supreme above them for the next 1,000 years. But even though they wanted to do so, none of them dared to act. If any power dared to make a move against Yuan Tong, then the consequences would be suffering catastrophic revenge from the Origin School. In the Southern Territory, It was probably only the two titans that were the Grand Qin Empire and the Dark Beast Empire who could endure the frenzied revenge of the Origin School. However, even these two titans wouldn't rashly lay hands on the Origin School's reverse scale, because once they'd offended this extraordinary sect, then even if they won the battle, they would suffer heavy losses and might even be completely destroyed. In the Southern Territory, just possessing good natural talent and potential was insufficient because one could perish at any moment. Besides good natural talent and potential, one needed a powerful backing as well. So long as one possessed powerful backing, then one had the chance of maturing successfully into an expert. Just like Xianxia right now, because he didn't possess formidable backing like the Origin School, everyone felt that he would definitely perish. In next to no time, the next battle began, and it was Lung Xinran who descended the arena. Her opponent was that disciple from the Lu clan, Lu Feng. Nothing unexpected occurred during this battle. After less than 10 exchanges, Lung Xinran had defeated Lu Feng. This caused the countless profounders below the arena to cheer endlessly once more. Besides Yuan Tong, Lung Xinran and Wenren, you had the greatest popularity amongst the top 8. Of course, besides the strength they possessed, it was also because of their respective beauty. After all, beauties were always welcomed anywhere. Not to mention that they were formidable beauties from the two palaces. Unfortunately, Wenren you had admitted defeat and her journey had stopped at the top 8. Lin Shuran against the Bright Moon Sect's Hao Ming. Right at this moment, Li Si's voice resounded once more by the side of everyone's ears. On the arena, Lin Shuran held the black iron sword as he gazed at Hao Ming who stood in front of him. Hao Ming's figure was slightly chubby, and there was always a faint smile on his face. Unlike Yuan Tong's smile, Hao Ming's smile felt sincere, and it didn't seem forced or faked at all. Of course, this wouldn't make Lin Shuran hold back. "Make your move," Lin Shuran spoke indifferently as he gazed at Hao Ming. Truthfully speaking, he'd never taken Hao Ming seriously since the beginning, and he felt that his opponents should be Yuan Tong, Wenren Yu, and Lung Xinran. Right, Xianxia could be considered as one as well. As for Hao Ming, he really didn't take Hao Ming seriously. Hao Ming wasn't infuriated by Lin Shuran's contemptuous tone. He smiled before his figure flashed explosively towards Lin Shuran. A wisp of disdain arose on the corners of Lin Shuran's mouth when he saw Hao Ming flash explosively towards him. With a light movement of his wrist, first-level sword intent surged out and instantly enveloped Hao Ming. The appearance of sword intent caused Hao Ming's speed to instantly slow down, and the disdain on the corners of Lin Shuran's mouth thickened when he saw this. However, right at this moment, Hao Ming's speed suddenly rose explosively, and he flashed towards Lin Shuran at a speed that was a few times faster than before. In merely an instant, he'd already arrived before Lin Shuran, and then countless palms formed from energy covered the heavens and the earth as they enveloped down towards Lin Shuran, who was slightly stunned. This sudden and unexpected event caused Lin Shuran to be slightly stunned, but he quickly recovered from his shock. After that, he twisted his wrist, and then numerous sword lights sprayed out from the black iron sword and instantly minced Hao Ming's energy palms into powder. However, right at this moment, Hao Ming had suddenly and shockingly appeared at Lin Shuran's right. After that, a dagger that was suffused with a ghastly and cold glow whistled sharply through the air as it swiped towards Lin Shuran's neck. Lin Shuran frowned slightly. He suddenly swept the black iron sword towards Hao Ming, and it was even slightly swifter than Hao Ming's dagger. Because Lin Shuran's attack was much faster than his own, Hao Ming had no choice but to stop his attack and move the dagger downwards to block Lin Shuran's sword. Clang! A clear and melodious clang resounded from the collision between the dagger and sword, while sparks shot towards the surroundings. Right when Lin Shuran intended to launch another attack, Hao Ming exerted slight force with his dagger and relied on the counterforce from the collision to flip backward. After he descended to the ground, he cupped his fists towards Lin Shuran and smiled as he said, "Brother Shuran's strength is amazing. I admit defeat." When he heard Hao Ming, Lin Shuran glanced deeply at Hao Ming. Lin Shuran's intuition told him that this smiling fellow before him, Hao Ming, hadn't utilized his full strength. Of course, even if Hao Ming revealed his full strength, Lin Shuran didn't fear it at all. He was just filled with wonder about why Hao Ming had suddenly admitted defeat. On the other hand, while Lin Shiran was puzzled, Hao Ming had walked off the arena. Hao Ming's admission of defeat wasn't like Wenren Yu's, and it didn't cause the crowd to discuss it animatedly while feeling puzzled. They'd never had any expectations of him, so when he admitted defeat now, they took it as him really being unable to rival Lin Shiran. After all, Lin Shiran had comprehended second-level sword intent. Along with Hao Ming's admission of defeat, the top 4 had been selected. They were the Origin School's Yuan Tong, the Snow Palace's Lang Xinran, the Sword Sect's Yang Yi, and Lin Shiran. At this point, the battles would grow more and more intense. Because not a single one of the top 4 were weaklings, and Yuan Tong's legend of defeating his opponents with one hit would probably be stopped here. As they gazed at Yang Yi and Lin Shiran who stood on the arena, countless people sighed endlessly with emotion. When had anyone imagined that Yang Yi and this unknown fellow, Lin Shiran, would actually be able to fight their way into the top 4 of the Ascension ranking? Of course, it surprised them even more that both Yang Yi and Lin Shiran had comprehended sword intent. Moreover, both of them weren't just at the first level of sword intent. At this moment, the more Yu Heng gazed at Yang Yi, the more pleasing to the eye he was. No matter what he thought of Yang Yi was very pleasing to his eye at this moment. Why? Because Yang Yi had fought his way into the top 4. So long as Yang Yi survived, then the Sword Sect would be able to change the embarrassing state it was in right now, and it was exactly because of this that he felt Yang Yi was extremely pleasing to the eye right now. Of course, as for the situation that Yang Yi would be in after the Ascension rankings came to an end, he'd never thought of it. Li Si appeared on the arena, and then he lightly nodded as he gazed at Yang Yi and the others. After that he said, "Congratulations on entering the top 4. According to the rules of the Ascension rankings, the profounder amongst the top 4 with the worst record during the competition can choose his or her opponent." When he spoke up to hear, Li Si gazed at Lin Shiran. Yang Yi, Yuan Tong, and Lang Xinran had never lost a battle, while only Lin Shiran had experienced a draw with Qin Yuran. In other words, he had the worst record. Lin Shiran's expression instantly became slightly unsightly. Of course, he didn't dare to give Li Si a dirty look because he wasn't audacious to such an extent. Lin Shiran grunted coldly, and then his gaze stopped on Yuan Tong for a moment before he glanced at Lang Shiran. In the end, his gaze descended onto Yang Yi, and then it didn't move away anymore. When he saw this, Li Si nodded slightly, and with a wave of his right hand, Lang Xinran and Yuan Tong instantly vanished from the arena. Lin Shiran against the Sword Sect's Yang Yi. Li Si's voice resounded on the arena after he left. When she saw Lin Shiran choose Yang Yi, Su Qingshir's beautiful brows had knit together, while Yu Heng, who stood by her side, had frowned as well. No matter what, Yang Yi was representing the Sword Sect right now. So, if Lin Shiran killed Yang Yi, then it would be bad news for the Sword Sect. Of course, if Yang Yi killed Lin Shiran, then it would be worst. Even though it was impossible. In short, Lin Shiran's actions had caused Yu Heng, who originally had a good impression of him, to feel slightly displeased. Yu Heng said in his heart, "This Lin Shiran really fails to consider the interests of the Sword Sect." At this moment, Qin Yunzi revealed a mocking expression. Since the very beginning, he'd guessed that Lin Shiran was related to the Sword Sect. Now, when he noticed Yu Heng and Su Qingshir's expressions, he was even more certain that Lin Shiran was definitely a member of the Sword Sect. Yet now, a disciple of the Sword Sect was going against the Sword Sect. Moreover, based on Lin Shiran's appearance, it didn't seem to be a normal battle as well. On the arena, Lin Shiran gazed at Yang Yi with a cold smile on his face. He said, "I never expected that we would be able to decide on a victor so quickly." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "Actually, this really isn't necessary because I've never thought of fighting you for the chance to take responsibility for the Sword Sect's future. I've told you this in the past, but it's very obvious that you didn't believe me. Since it's like that, then let's battle." Lin Shiran laughed coldly and said, "Since you've comprehended sword intent, then I presume your attainments in the Sword Dao are not bad. It just so happens that I feel that I wouldn't lose to anyone from the younger generation in terms of the Sword Dao. Today, Let's see who's the true genius in the sword Dao. I'll allow the entire sword sect to realize that they weren't mistaken to choose me. As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Shiran took a step forward, and then peak second-level sword intent surged towards Yang Yi. His sword intent was seemingly material. Everywhere it passed, the air was completely minced into pieces while explosions resounded incessantly in the surroundings. Yang Yi took a step forward as well, and then he released his sword intent. Two extremely sharp and fierce sword intents encountered each other in midair. The space there instantly started shaking while fine rifts started spreading like spiderwebs on the entire ground of the arena. Moreover, these rifts were spreading towards the surroundings at an extremely swift speed. The crowd below the arena exclaimed with shock when they witnessed such a scene. Is this how terrifying sword intent is? If we ascend the arena, the two of them would probably have no need to attack because we wouldn't even be able to resist their sword intent. It's truly terrifying. Geniuses in the sword Dao who have comprehended sword intent are truly extremely terrifying. If an extraordinarily monstrous genius like Yuan Tong hadn't participated in the Ascension rankings, then this year's Ascension rankings would probably be a stage that belonged to the two of them. Unfortunately, Yuan Tong is participating. So, they who have comprehended second-level sword intent can only serve as contrast for Yuan Tong. Needless to say, being from the same generation as Yuan Tong is their misfortune. Forget about Yuan Tong. Which one of these geniuses of the sword Dao will win? Both of them possess second-level sword intent, so I think it'll depend on the combat techniques they possess. And the one who possesses a combat technique of higher quality would have a higher chance at victory. Then it's probably Lin Shiran. You should have seen the sword technique he utilized to heavily injure Qin Yuran, right? If Qin Yuran wasn't wearing that mid-grade Earth rank armor, then he would have been instantly annihilated. I think we can't underestimate Yang Yi as well. Even though Yang Yi hasn't executed any shocking combat techniques until now, both Qin Yuran and Li Xianjun perished at his hands. At this moment, the arena was filled with two extremely fierce and sharp sword intents. The entire arena seemed like an invisible shredder that even ceaselessly shredded the air in the surroundings. It caused those profounders who were originally standing around the area to move far behind. It was because the terrifying pressure created by those two sword intents caused them to not dare approach the arena at all. Since the Ascension rankings began, this is the most exciting battle. On the wall of the Imperial Palace, Qin Yunzi gazed at the two figures on the arena and said with a smile, "A battle between two geniuses of the sword Dao who have comprehended sword intent is truly a feast for the eyes." Qin Yunzi seemed to have intentionally spoken slightly loudly this time, and it allowed all the members of the other powers to be able to hear him clearly. Of course. Kai Feng glanced at Yu Hong, and then she smiled as she said, "Both Yang Yi and Lin Shiran have comprehended second-level sword intent at such a young age. If they're given time to rise to prominence, then they'll definitely become extraordinary experts in the future. Unfortunately, there's undisguised killing intent in both their eyes. Looks like one of them is bound to die on the arena." All the great figures here weren't idiots. If they still hadn't realized that there was some sort of relationship between Lin Shiran and the Sword Sect, then they would have truly wasted their lives until now. It was exactly because they knew that Lin Shiran was a member of the Sword Sect that they took such pleasure in the Sword Sect's misfortune. They were two geniuses in the Sword Dao, and if both of them rose to prominence, then the Sword Sect would have two extraordinary experts in the future. Yet now, these two geniuses in the Sword Dao had actually become enemies and were about to kill each other. Needless to say, the higher-ups of the Sword Sect were really huge failures. At this moment, Yu Heng's expression was extremely unsightly, but there was even more helplessness on his face, because he wasn't able to give orders to any one of the two figures on the arena. Yang Yi wasn't a disciple of the Sword Sect anymore, while Lin Shiran had Taoist Zue standing behind him. Even though Yu Hong was an expert at the Exalt realm, what could he do? Because both of them wouldn't listen to him at all. On the arena, Lin Shiran's expression was slightly unsightly, because he noticed that his sword intent was slightly inferior in sharpness to Yang Yi. In the eyes of the spectators, they seemed to be on par, but only he knew that his sword intent was slightly unable to resist Yang Ye's sword intent. and his discovery caused Lin Shuran to become slightly angry from the embarrassment he felt. Because up until now, he'd always felt that even if Yang Yi had comprehended sword intent, Yang Ye's sword intent would definitely be inferior in purity to his own. But now, as for Yang Yi, his expression was extremely relaxed at this moment. What a joke! Mere second-level sword intent was truly like child's play to him. If it wasn't for the sake of retaining some strength and trump cards, he could instantly blast Lin Shuran's sword intent into pieces by utilizing third-level sword intent. However, there was truly no need for that, as second-level sword intent was already sufficient to deal with Lin Shuran. Because he noticed that Lin Shuran's sword intent wasn't pure. Right at this moment, Lin Shuran suddenly took a step forward. With a flick of his thumb, the black iron sword instantly flashed up before him while its tip was pointed directly at Yang Yi. He said, "Yang Yi, if you survive an attack of mine, then I, Lin Shuran, will admit defeat." His tone was filled with heroic sentiment. When they heard Lin Shuran, an uproar erupted in the surroundings. Why would Lin Shuran suddenly become so confident when they both possess second-level sword intent? Could it be that he's going to execute a heaven-rank combat technique? Yang Ye's expression turned slightly solemn. He would never underestimate any opponent, let alone Lin Shuran, who was Taoist Zue's disciple. With Taoist Zue's strength and resources, how inferior could the combat techniques cultivated by his disciple be? Perhaps it was impossible for Lin Shuran to possess a heaven-rank technique, but a mid-grade earth-rank or high-grade earth-rank technique was extremely likely. Yang Yi took a deep breath while he took a step forward, and then the profound energy within his body instantly started roiling. After that, he said, "Come, let me see exactly what combat technique allows you to feel such confidence." "Ha ha!" Lin Shuran roared with laughter. He laughed for a while before he suddenly moved his hands and formed a strange seal before his chest. As soon as he formed the seal, strands of white-colored sword chi surged ceaselessly from the hilt of his sword to the tip of it. However, when the strands of sword chi arrived at the tip of the black iron sword, they strangely stopped moving, and then they formed into a fist-sized ball of white light. Sword chi converging at the tip of the sword, 1,000 strands of sword chi transforming into one. As he gazed at Lin Shuran's actions on the arena, Qing Yunzi said in a low voice, "This is the sword technique Taoist Zue is famous for, the infinite flash sword. Lin Shuran is actually Taoist Zue's disciple. What a surprise! The might of this sword technique is extraordinary. However, I wonder how many % of its might he's able to display." Yuan Tong spoke flatly from Qing Yunzi's side. "Of course it's extraordinary. Even though it's a mid-grade earth-rank technique, its might isn't inferior to a high-grade earth-rank technique at all. Not to mention that Lin Shuran has comprehended sword intent. So, while it's impossible for him to bring forth 100% of its might, he should be able to display at least 70 or 80% of it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bragged like he had just now," said Qing Yunzi in an indifferent tone. Yuan Tong smiled, and then he said, "I look forward to seeing how Yang Yi will deal with it." At the moment she saw Lin Shuran execute this combat technique, Su Qingshi's beautiful brows couldn't help but knit together once more, while dense worry appeared in her eyes. She'd never imagined that her martial uncle Zue would have actually passed this technique down to Lin Shuran. In terms of might, the infinite flash sword was ranked at the top amongst all the earth-rank techniques of the sword sect. So, how could Yang Yi resist it? On the arena, the white ball of light on the tip of Lin Shuran's black iron sword had transformed from a fist-sized ball to a skull-sized ball in less than 2 breaths of time. The energy contained within the white ball of light was extremely terrifying, and the space around the ball of light shook ceaselessly. Yang Ye's expression grew even more solemn as he gazed at the ball of light on the tip of Lin Shuran's black iron sword. Because even if they were over 30 m apart, he was still able to sense the terrifying energy contained within the ball of light. It could be said that the combat technique Lin Shuran executed was the most terrifying combat technique he'd witnessed until now. Even though he hadn't seen this combat technique being launched yet, his intuition had told him all of this. Yang Yi lightly let out a mouthful of air, and then with a twist of his wrist, he stabbed Violet Spirit into the ground beside him. The countless spectators in the surroundings were stunned when they witnessed this scene. What's he trying to do? Admit defeat? After he stabbed Violet's spirit in the ground, Xianxia gradually clenched both his palms into fists, while the golden profound energy within his body surged like tidewater onto his fists. Bang! A light band resounded as the sleeves of Xianxia's clothes had instantly exploded into pieces to reveal Xianxia's bronze-colored arms. As his profound energy surged ceaselessly into them, numerous veins that seemed like little snakes had started to gradually appear on his arms. In next to no time, Xianxia's arms were covered densely in veins, and it seemed extremely terrifying. At a certain moment in time, Lin Xiaoran suddenly pushed forward with his hands that were still maintaining the strange seal from before. Go! As soon as he finished speaking, the black iron sword and the skull-sized ball of white light shot swiftly towards Xianxia like a ray of light. Everywhere they passed, space shook incessantly as if it was on the verge of shattering into pieces, and the might it revealed was extremely terrifying to the point all the spectators below felt extremely shocked. Xianxia's eyes narrowed when he saw this scene. He pulled his fists back a little, and then he suddenly smashed them forward in the next instant. Dragon Breaker! Along with this shout from Xianxia, an enormous explosion of the air that sounded like a thunderclap resounded abruptly. The crowd was astounded, and then they looked over towards Xianxia's position. They saw two golden fists formed from energy had suddenly appeared in front of Xianxia, and they were like two cannonballs. They shot out in single file and were accompanied by explosions of the air as they smashed violently towards the black iron sword and ball of white light. The air in the surroundings was instantly sucked away wherever these two golden energy fists passed, and even space showed faint signs of warping. The expressions of the great figures on the walls of the imperial palace changed when they saw Xianxia execute this technique, and it was even to the extent that the expressions of Bai Qi and Li Si, who were the most indifferent before this, had changed as well. The Dragon Breaker was the combat technique that Emperor Zhou was famous for all those years ago. Of course, this wasn't the reason their expressions had changed, and it was instead because they wondered why Xianxia knew the Dragon Breaker technique that belonged to Emperor Zhou. Under the astounded gazes of countless people, the two golden energy fists collided with the white ball of light. After an instant of deathly silence, bang! An enormous bang that shook the heavens suddenly rumbled and resounded on the arena. After that, as soon as the two peerlessly ferocious forces encountered each other, they violently released the terrifying energy contained within them. In an instant, a terrifying wave of energy appeared in the air of the arena, and it whistled through the entire arena. Moreover, even space itself was actually struck by the terrifying energy to the point of warping and becoming fuzzy. Meanwhile, Xianxia and Lin Xiaoran were immediately blasted flying by the terrifying wave of energy, and at the same time that they were blasted flying, a bang resounded as the arena rumbled and collapsed once more. When they witnessed this scene, the crowd was astounded. This was caused by profounders at the First Heaven realm? Even king-rank experts might not be able to bring forth such terrifying might. On the ruins of the arena, Xianxia and Lin Xiaoran lay there without moving. Right when everyone wondered who had won the battle, Xianxia, who lay on the ground, had suddenly started standing up slowly. As he gazed at the numerous fine injuries that had split the flesh on his chest, Xianxia let out a lit sigh of relief and said, "Fortunately, my physical body is strong, otherwise I would have probably been heavily injured for a long time from the might of the collision between these two earth-rank techniques." After stretching his body slightly, Xianxia gazed at Lin Xiaoran, who lied on the ground without moving, and then his gaze turned icy cold. Xianxia didn't hesitate to gesture with his hand, and the violet spirit sword that had been blasted flying by the wave of energy instantly flew back into his grasp. After that, he started walking slowly towards Lin Xiaoran. When he saw this scene, Yu Heng's expression changed, and his figure flashed before he appeared on the ruins of the arena. However, right when he appeared here, both Li Si and Bai Qi had appeared before her at the same time. "Exalt Yu Heng. You ought to be aware of the Ascension Rankings rules." Li Si gazed at Yu Heng as he spoke. Yu Heng glanced at Lin Xiaoran, who lay on the ground, and said, "He is lost. Xianxia has won the battle. He hasn't admitted defeat." Li Si spoke indifferently. So long as he hasn't admitted defeat, then the competition hasn't come to an end. Of course, it's an entirely different matter if Yang Yi is willing to relinquish this opportunity to kill him. Yu Heng looked at Yang Yi when he heard this, and then he said, Yang Yi, there's no deep enmity between the two of you, so there's no necessity for you to kill him, right? You have to understand that he's Martial Uncle Zue's disciple. So, killing him wouldn't be beneficial to you at all. I wouldn't gain any benefit by refraining from killing him, right? A wisp of a cold smile arose on the corners of Yang Ye's mouth, and he said, Moreover, Senior Yu Heng, I reminded you a long time ago that you should advise him not to offend me if you don't want the Sword Sect to lose a genius. However, he chose me to be his opponent and intended to kill me. Allow me to ask you a question. Why didn't you advise him earlier? Or perhaps, only he, Lin Shuran, can kill me, but I, Yang Yi, can't kill him. Yu Heng was speechless when he heard this. At the beginning, he'd advised Lin Shuran not to go against Yang Yi. Unfortunately, Lin Shuran hadn't listened to him. He was quite annoyed by this, but even though he was annoyed, Lin Shuran still couldn't die in the end. Right when Yu Heng was about to say something, Yang Yi looked at Li Si and said, Senior Li, can I continue? Li Si glanced deeply at Yang Yi, and then he turned to look at Yu Heng and said, Exalt you, this minister will repeat it one last time. Please leave at once. Otherwise, I won't show mercy. Flames of rage flashed in Yu Heng's eyes. However, he had no choice but to leave because he knew that Li Si was definitely not joking with him. Once Li Si and Bai Qi attacked, then their strength would surely be sufficient to make him perish on the spot. Moreover, he would have died for nothing, because not only would the Sword Sect refrain from taking revenge for him, it would even have to offer an apology to the Grand Qin Empire and the other 5 powers. Yu Heng glanced deeply at Yang Yi before his figure flashed and vanished on the spot. After Yu Heng left, Bai Qi, who'd been silent all along, had suddenly looked at Yang Yi and said, Kid, are you really going to kill him? Yang Yi smiled, and then he walked towards Lin Shuran, who'd fallen unconscious. He said while he walked, Why would I not? Could it be that he would be grateful to me if I didn't? He's the disciple of the Sword Sect's Taoist Zue, and you're a disciple of the Sword Sect as well. If you kill him, then not only would you offend Taoist Zue, you'll even suffer the reputation of being one that killed another from his own sect. It isn't worth it, said Bai Qi. Reputation. Yang Yi shook his head and said, What's the point of such a thing? Not to mention that my reputation is already so horrible, so what if it gets worse? In any case, it's not important to me. As for Taoist Zue, I believe that a living genius is always more important than a dead one. When he heard this, a strand of admiration flashed in Bai Qi's eyes as he gazed at Yang Yi, and then he said, If you're able to survive the battle with Yuan Tong, then come to my bloodbath camp, and I'll guarantee your safety. Li Si frowned when he heard Bai Qi, but he didn't say anything. Yang Yi flicked his sword and violet spirit flashed past Lin Shuran's neck, causing Lin Shuran's head to be instantly swept into the air. After he did all of this, Yang Yi suddenly turned to look at Bai Qi before he said, What if I gain the first? My Grand Qin Empire will guarantee your safety. It wasn't Bai Qi that said this, and it was Li Si instead. Li Si gazed at Yang Yi and said, If you're able to obtain the first and are willing to join my Grand Qin Empire, then my empire will guarantee your safety. Moreover, it'll foster you with great effort. Of course, the precondition is obtaining the first. Yang Yi smiled, and he didn't say anything as he turned around and left. The price the Grand Qin Empire was willing to pay was slightly insufficient. So long as he obtained the first, then it represented that he, Yang Yi, could defeat the future martial god. At that time, he believed that numerous powers would stand out to protect him. It was even to the extent that so long as he was willing, even the Origin School would open its doors to him. If Yang Yi merely wanted to stay alive, then wouldn't it be an extremely simple task? All he had to do was hide in the Grand Myriad Mountains. With the little fellow by his side, could anyone do anything to him? However, Yang Ye's objective wasn't to merely stay alive, and it was to rescue his mother instead. If he wanted to rescue his mother, then he was bound to have to go against a colossus, the Flower Palace. Would these powers fight the Flower Palace to the death for his sake? The answer was a definite no. In the end, it always came down to the same conclusion. He had to depend on himself for everything. As he gazed at Xianxia's back, Bai Qi said in a low voice, "This kid isn't bad, but he's just unable to let go of his mother. It's truly quite a pity." "It is quite a pity." Li Si spoke in a light voice. How ruthless of Yang Yi. He'd clearly obtained victory, yet he still killed Lin Xiran. Such character is truly ruthless and cruel to the extreme. Exactly. Lin Xiran had already fallen unconscious, but he still refused to let Lin Xiran go. When compared to Yuan Tong's kindness and righteousness, Yang Yi is as ruthless and vicious as the members of the Ghost Sect. No, even the members of the Ghost Sect aren't as ruthless and vicious as him. Humph. Just wait and see. Yuan Tong will teach him a lesson sooner or later. After 2 hours passed, a new arena had appeared once more on the square, and a new battle began, because Lin Xiran had chosen Yang Yi. So it was naturally a battle between Yuan Tong and Lang Xinran. On the arena, Yuan Tong had his hands behind his back as he gazed at Lang Xinran, and he said, "Amongst the profounders that participated in this year's Ascension ranking, there are only a few that I take seriously. You're one of them. I hope you don't disappoint me." "I won't." Lang Xinran was sparing with her words. Yuan Tong nodded lightly and said, "Make your move." Lang Xinran raised her hands slightly, and then the profound energy within her body instantly started surging. Suddenly, a strand of coldness appeared here. Some profounders that were comparatively closer to the arena instantly felt a strand of coldness assault them, and they couldn't help but shudder before hurriedly retreating a few meters back. At this moment, as Lang Xinran's hands moved incessantly, the energy within her body started to seethe and surge like boiling water. Circle after circle of pure white and seemingly material ripples swept out incessantly from her, and then numerous white specks appeared around her. It was the air in the surroundings that had frozen. What a genius! She actually cultivated the Snow Palace's 1,000 leagues of snow technique to such a level. As expected of the most monstrous genius in the young generation of the Snow Palace. In the future, she'll absolutely be able to become a formidable existence like the Ice Maiden. On the walls of the Imperial Palace, Qing Yunzi praised as he gazed at Lang Xinran. Kai Feng grunted coldly, but she strangely didn't refute this because Lang Xinran really was an extremely monstrous genius. On the arena, Yuan Tong was still standing proudly on the spot, while allowing Lang Xinran to accumulate strength. Such composure caused the countless profounders below the arena to be filled with extreme adoration. At a certain moment in time, Lang Xinran suddenly slapped her hands towards the space in front of her. 1,000 leagues of snow. Along with this fierce shout from Lang Xinran, a strand of pure white energy suddenly swept out from her hands. As soon as the pure white energy appeared, the spot where she stood was instantly frozen by ice. Moreover, the ice was spreading at an extremely swift speed. In less than the time of a single breath, around 30 m in Lang Xinran's surroundings was covered in ice. Of course, more terrifying than this was that snow had actually started to descend from the sky above the arena, when the ice stretched out and arrived 1.5 m before Yuan Tong. He slowly clenched his hands that were kept behind his back, and then he stomped lightly with his right foot to instantly propel his figure up into the sky. However, the ice that was stretching towards him seemed as if it had eyes, and it actually pursued Yuan Tong. Moreover, it was extremely swift and had instantly arrived beneath Yuan Tong's feet. After that, Yuan Tong's feet were instantly frozen, and in less than half a breath of time, Yuan Tong's entire body was sealed within ice. The countless spectators in the surroundings were dumbstruck when they witnessed this scene. Yuan Tong has lost just like that? Right when this thought had just arisen in their minds, a light cracking sound resounded abruptly from the arena. After that, everyone saw numerous fine cracks starting to appear on the hard ice that sealed Yuan Tong. After a breath of time passed, a bang resounded as the hard ice that covered Yuan Tong had instantly exploded into pieces. In the air, Yuan Tong raised his leg, and then he suddenly descended like he weighed 1,000 kilograms. After that, he swiftly stomped his right leg onto the arena that was covered in ice. Bang! The entire arena trembled violently. After that, under the astounded gazes of the spectators, the hard ice that covered the entire arena had exploded into pieces and transformed into countless bits. After he destroyed Leng Xinran's combat technique, he lowered his head to gaze at his slightly red and swollen fists, and then he said, "A pretty good Earth rank technique. If it was slightly strong, then I'm afraid even I wouldn't be able to destroy it with such ease. Utilize your strongest trump card, otherwise you wouldn't have an opportunity once I made a move. You ought to be clearly aware that I'm not boasting." As she gazed at the bits of ice that covered the entire ground, Leng Xinran took a deep breath, and then she stopped hesitating and gently stretched out her fair hand. In an instant, the snowflakes that drifted through the air above the arena had suddenly stopped descending, and they'd frozen in midair. Leng Xinran lightly spun her hand, and then those frozen snowflakes had suddenly started to spin swiftly. In an instant, sharp whistled that caused a chill to run down the spines of others resounded through the air above the arena. It's the Snow Palace's high-grade Earth-rank combat technique, Snowflake Annihilation. Supposedly, the requirements to cultivate this technique are extremely harsh. Not only does it require the person cultivating it to possess water element profound energy, that person must possess the Ice Jade physique. It's exactly because of these two harsh requirements that besides that extraordinary expert who created this technique, no one else in the history of the Snow Palace was able to cultivate it successfully. I never expected that Leng Xinran would have actually cultivated it successfully. Murong Yao spoke in a low voice while she stood by Yang Ye's side. Yang Yi nodded lightly, and then he said, "The energy contained within those snowflakes are extremely terrifying, and ordinary profounders would probably be unable to resist a single flower. Since Wenren Yu is equally famous to Leng Xinran, I presume she definitely possesses some sort of shocking combat technique as well. If she hadn't admitted defeat, then I would have probably had to experience a difficult battle with her. I haven't asked you this until now, but why did Wenren Yu admit defeat?" Murong Yao turned to gaze at Yang Yi as she asked this question. Yang Yi laughed bitterly and said, "Truthfully speaking, I'm very puzzled as well." Murong Yao glanced at him, and then she stopped questioning him and turned around to look towards the arena. On the arena, Yuan Tong revealed a wisp of a solemn expression for the first time. Even he had no choice but to take a high-grade Earth-rank technique seriously. Of course, it was mainly because Leng Xinran had cultivated it to a certain extent. This time, Yuan Tong didn't dare be careless, and the profound energy within his body surged towards his right palm. Right at this moment, Leng Xinran suddenly pushed her hand lightly towards Yuan Tong, and she shouted softly at the same time, "Go!" As soon as her voice resounded in the air, the countless snowflakes in the surroundings had instantly shot explosively towards Yuan Tong in a dense expanse. Every single snowflake was to cause a sharp whistle to resound through the air. The countless sharp whistled resounded incessantly in the surroundings, causing it to be extremely uncomfortable for innumerable profounders below the arena. It was even to the extent that blood had started to pour out from the ears of some profounders who were comparatively closer to the arena. They were horrified by this scene, and they hurriedly retreated swiftly. On the arena, Yuan Tong's eyes narrowed slightly. When the dense expanse of snowflakes arrived 3 m away from him, Yuan Tong flipped his palm so that it faced downward. In the next moment, he pressed it forward as he said, "Heaven split palm!" As soon as his voice resounded, an enormous palm formed from energy appeared out of thin air in front of Yuan Tong, and then it blasted towards the dense expanse of snowflakes. Space shook everywhere it passed, and the imposing aura it emanated made it seem like it could even split the heavens. Murong Yao's expression instantly became solemn when she saw Yuan Tong execute this combat technique. At that day on Ascension Mountain Range, Yuan Tong had utilized this exact technique to instantly annihilate a few dozen king-rank dark beasts. Will Leng Xinran's Snowflake Annihilation be able to resist Yuan Tong's attack? It wasn't just Murong Yao who had a solemn expression. Yang Ye's expression was solemn as well. Besides, because of the terrifying might this Earth-rank technique revealed, His expression was solemn because of the speed Yuan Tong had executed it at. Ordinary profounders had to accumulate strength before they could execute an earth rank technique, just like how Ling Xinran had accumulated strength before she executed the snowflake annihilation technique. However, Yuan Tong had just casually swung his hand and executed an earth rank technique. Under the astounded gazes of all the spectators, the enormous energy palm and the dense snowflakes collided violently. In an instant, enormous bangs that could shake the world resounded like thunderclaps throughout the area. After that, a terrifying wave of energy that was like a tornado had appeared on the arena. When this tornado of energy appeared, the entire arena was instantly minced into pieces. It hadn't collapsed, and it had been minced into pieces instead. However, this wasn't the end of it. After it destroyed the entire arena, the tornado actually swept towards the profounders below the arena, causing them to be filled with horror. Fortunately, right at this moment, Li Si suddenly appeared in the sky above them. As he gazed at the tornado that carried terrifying and violent energy, Li Si stretched out his right hand and waved it lightly. After that, the enormous tornado had suddenly burst apart mysteriously. Li Si gazed at Yuan Tong, who was on the ground below him, and then his figure flashed and vanished on the spot. After a short moment, everything returned to calm. Ling Xinran and Yuan Tong were both fine. An extremely thick shield of ice had been condensed around Ling Xinran, and it was exactly this shield of ice that allowed her to remain completely unscathed before the tornado of energy. As for Yuan Tong, his ability to remain completely unscathed slightly puzzled everyone because Yuan Tong hadn't utilized any treasure or executed any defensive technique. "Do you still intend to continue?" Yuan Tong was the first to speak. Ling Xinran glanced deeply at Yuan Tong, and then she said, "I've lost." As soon as she finished speaking, Ling Xinran walked down the arena. When she arrived by Yang Ye's side, she stopped and looked at him before she said, "He's very strong. Out of consideration for the fact that we've worked together in the past, allow me to advise you not to exert any pointless effort." Yang Yi smiled, and he twisted his wrist, causing 2 ice soul fruits flew towards Ling Xinran. After that he said, "Thank you for your advice. However, I want to give it a try. I think that you would like to witness the limits of this future martial god as well, right?" After she put the ice soul fruits away, Ling Xinran took a deep glance at Yang Yi before she left. Before long, another new arena had appeared at the center of the square. Li Si appeared on the new arena, and then he glanced at Yang Yi and Yuan Tong before he said, "Both of you can choose to rest for a day or start the battle right now." Yuan Tong smiled indifferently and said, "There's no need for that." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked at Yang Yi. Yang Yi glanced at Yuan Tong before he said, "My thoughts are the same." Since they had to fight sooner or later, Yang Yi felt that it was better to finish it right now. Li Si glanced at Yang Yi and then he said, "Since it's like that, then the battles will begin once more." The Sword Sect's Yang Yi against the Origin School's Yuan Tong. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Si's figure flashed and vanished from the arena. When Yuan Tong appeared on the arena, the surroundings instantly started seething with excitement. Yuan Tong, martial god, one hit. The shouts of countless people converged together, and its impetus was extremely astounding. At this moment, everyone in the entire Southern Territory felt that Yang Yi would definitely lose. No, it should be said as they felt he would definitely die. Because up until now, no one had been able to make Yuan Tong reveal his full strength. Even Ling Xinran from the Snow Palace had no choice but to admit defeat before him. As for Yang Yi, what could he do even if he'd comprehended sword intent? Perhaps sword intent would be terrifying to others, but it was insufficient in front of Yuan Tong. Did Yang Yi have a chance to win? In their opinions, he naturally didn't. Even though Yang Yi still hadn't lost until now, Yang Yi had won with extreme difficulty against Li Xianjun, Qin Yuran, and Lin Shuran. On the other hand, even if he was facing a formidable opponent like Ling Xinran, Yuan Tong could be said to have won every single battle with ease. So, wasn't it obvious who was superior between the two of them? On the wall of the Imperial Palace, Su Qingshi couldn't help but clench her fists tightly at the moment Yang Yi, ascended the arena. She knew Yang Yi was very strong and definitely had some sort of trump card, but even she was slightly doubtful in his ability to defeat Yuan Tong. It wasn't that Yang Yi was weak, and it was because Yuan Tong was too strong. There was once a time when she wanted to ask Yang Yi to directly admit defeat because she knew that it was very likely for Yuan Tong to strike a killing blow against Yang Yi. Why? There were many reasons. One of them was that countless participants in the surroundings hoped for Yang Ye's death. If he killed Yang Yi, then Yuan Tong's popularity would instantly rise once more to a completely new level. However, was it even possible to make Yang Yi admit defeat? The answer was, it was impossible. On the other side, Kai Feng's face could really be said to be covered with smiles. If Yang Yi didn't admit defeat immediately in the battle with Yuan Tong, then Yang Yi would definitely have no chance to admit defeat. Moreover, based on the investigation and understanding she'd obtained about Yang Yi, she knew that Yang Yi would absolutely not admit defeat. So, in other words, Yang Yi was dead. There was no resentment and enmity between her and Yang Yi. Yang Ye's only fault was being Feng Yu's son, and the relationship between her and Feng Yu was, how many moves from Yuan Tong do all of you think Yang Yi will be able to withstand? I guess he should be able to resist around 10 moves. After all, he killed Li Xianjun and Qin Yuran, said a profounder beneath the arena. 10 moves? You think too highly of him. I bet that he'd be defeated within 5 moves. No, he'll be killed within 5 moves. Sword intent? Sword intent is trash before Yuan Tong. I think that since Yang Yi dared to participate in the Ascension rankings and dares to fight Yuan Tong now, he probably has some sort of trump card. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to go give his life away, right? Perhaps he'll directly admit defeat later? On the arena, Yuan Tong had his hands behind his back as he gazed at Yang Yi, and then he said indifferently, actually, I truly never imagined that you would be able to come all the way and fight the final battle with me. Needless to say, Li Xianjun, Qin Yuran, and Wenren Yu's performance really disappointed me. I originally expected that it should be one of them who would be standing here before me. Yang Yi smiled and said, my thoughts just happened to be the opposite of yours. At the moment I decided to participate in the Ascension rankings, I'd already know that I would have such a battle with you. Truthfully speaking, I've wanted to fight to my heart's content since the beginning, and now, I can finally have what I wanted. Oh! Yuan Tong's brows raised, and he said, you're really confident in yourself, huh? I know you definitely have some sort of trump card, otherwise you wouldn't dare to stand here before me. I only want to say that I hope your trump card and your strength isn't too weak. After all, I too hope to fight somewhat to my heart's content in the final battle of the Ascension rankings. Yang Yi said, then shall we begin? Yuan Tong suddenly asked. Yuan Yi was killed by you, right? Yang Yi didn't conceal it, nor was there any necessity to conceal it, and he immediately nodded. Then you must die. Yuan Tong spoke indifferently. Of course, you still have to die even if you didn't kill Yuan Yi, because my origin school doesn't wish to see the sword sect rise once more. But what if I don't want to die? It was a rare occasion where Yang Yi wasted his breath in battle. Then make your move. Otherwise, it's very likely that you wouldn't have another opportunity. Yuan Tong spoke in an indifferent tone. Yang Yi nodded, and then he took a step forward. First-level sword intent surged out from within him. Yuan Tong smiled coldly and allowed the sword intent to assault him because first-level sword intent and second-level sword intent were utterly unable to affect him at all. Right at this moment, Yang Yi took another step forward. This time, his first-level sword intent had transformed into second-level sword intent. However, a cold smile and disdain still hung on Yuan Tong's face. Under the gazes of everyone in the surroundings, Yang Yi took another step forward. Bang! Right at the instant that Yang Ye's foot descended, the ground beneath his foot instantly cracked apart, and numerous cracks swept swiftly towards the surroundings like a spiderweb. Third-level sword intent. When they witnessed this scene, everyone in the surroundings was stunned, and this included those great figures that resided on the walls of the Imperial Palace. The initial stage of sword intent? Yang Yi has attained the initial stage of sword intent? Is this a joke? the initial stage of sword intent before the age of 20. Yuan Tong, who stood before Yang Yi, frowned slightly. Obviously, he'd never imagined that Yang Yi had actually attained the initial stage of sword intent. But so what? Why would he, Yuan Tong, fear third-level sword intent? So his brows had quickly eased up. Moreover, he revealed an extremely excited expression, because the battle that was about to begin might be much more interesting. However, right at this moment, Yang Yi took another step forward. Clang! At the instant Yang Yi's foot descended to the ground, the entire ground of the arena shattered into pieces as if it had suffered a heavy blow. At the same time, a sword howl suddenly erupted from the swords of every single profounder in the surroundings. Moreover, their swords had started to tremble as if they intended to charge into the sky. Fourth-level sword intent. When they witnessed this scene, the countless profounders below the arena were dumbstruck. If they were surprised earlier, then they were shocked now. Extremely shocked. Fourth-level sword intent. What sort of notion was that? Even the founding ancestor of the sword sect was around such a level at this age, right? On the walls of the imperial palace, Qing Yunzi's expression had turned solemn because fourth-level sword intent was really sufficient to pose a threat to Yuan Tong. Kai Feng's expression had become extremely unsightly. Fourth-level sword intent. Fourth-level sword intent before the age of 20. If he's able to survive and grow, then he'll definitely be a huge calamity for my flower palace. Yang Yi must die no matter what, even if I have to do it myself. At this moment, Kai Feng had decided in her heart. On the other hand, the sword sect's Yu Hong had an extremely bitter expression. Fourth-level sword intent. At this moment, the regret in his heart seemed like tidewater as it surged out from the depths of his heart. A monstrous genius that attained the fourth level of sword intent before the age of 20 was actually abandoned by the sword sect just like that. The sword sect's decision was really wrong. Su Qingshi heaved a slight sigh of relief instead because Yang Yi, who possessed fourth-level sword intent, possessed the ability to fight Yuan Tong. It was even to the extent that he could pose a threat to Yuan Tong. At this moment, she'd finally seen a glimmer of hope. A genius of the sword Dao. Li Si spoke while he gazed at Yang Yi. On the arena, Yuan Tong frowned once more, and then he said in a deep voice, Yang Yi, needless to say, all of us underestimated you. However, do you think only you possess intent at the fourth level? As soon as he finished speaking, Yuan Tong took a step forward, and then a strand of terrifying battle intent that wasn't the slightest bit inferior to Yang Yi's sword intent had swept out like a tornado. Bang! The two intents collided with each other, and the newly built arena instantly collapsed completely. Moreover, the collapsed arena actually started to be minced into pieces under the might of their intents. Fourth-level battle intent. Everyone in the surroundings gasped when they witnessed this scene. Yuan Tong has really comprehended battle intent. Moreover, it's even at the fourth level. As expected of the existence that's most likely to become the martial god. He has attained fourth-level battle intent before the age of 20. If he has even comprehended fist intent, then Yuan Tong can probably truly be considered as the most monstrous genius in the Southern Territory for the last 1,000 years. As he gazed at Yuan Tong, who stood on the arena, Li Si spoke in a low voice. Bai Qi, who stood by Li Si's side, spoke abruptly. If he really has comprehended fist intent as well, then Yang Yi will be in danger. Li Si glanced at Yang Yi, and then he said, Yang Yi's luck is truly horrible. If Yuan Tong wasn't here, then he would become the most dazzling existence in the younger generation. Unfortunately, it's very likely that he'll serve as a contrast to Yuan Tong's magnificent reputation as the martial god. The two extremely formidable and fierce intents were raging through the square, causing even the harm limestone that paved the ground to be unable to endure them and start to crack slowly. On the other hand, those profounders that were originally below the arena had retreated over 60 m behind. As they gazed at the two figures on the battlefield that had caused such destructive force with only their intent, the countless profounders in the surroundings were extremely shocked. At this moment, they finally understood that the intent of legend was actually so terrifying. Yuan Tong gazed at Yang Yi while a cold smile hung on the corners of his mouth. He said, Yang Yi, what other trump cards do you have? Feel free to utilize them. Otherwise, it's very likely that you won't have another chance. Yang Yi took a deep breath. As expected, he really deserves to be the most monstrous genius in the Southern Territory for the last 1,000 years. It really is impossible to suppress him by relying solely on my 4th-level sword intent. When he thought up to here, Yang Yi flipped his palm, and a sword chest appeared in his hand. When facing an existence like Yuan Tong, ordinary techniques and attacks were utterly useless. So, Yang Yi had directly exposed 2 trump cards that he hadn't exposed until now. With a command in his heart, the 36 profound rank swords within the sword chest transformed into 36 rays of light that shot into the sky. Under Yang Ye's control, the 36 swords swiftly formed a circle in midair, and they circled around above Yuan Tong. The speed of these 36 swords was extremely swift, and it was to the point the spectators were unable to see the swords clearly and could only see 36 strands of white light circling swiftly in midair. Yuan Tong's eyes narrowed slightly as he gazed at the 36 swords, and a wisp of a solemn expression had flashed once more in the depths of his eyes. The sword formation formed from the 36 swords wasn't very terrifying, and the truly terrifying aspect was that these 36 swords were being enhanced by 4th-level sword intent. Under the enhancement of 4th-level sword intent, the might of this sword formation seemed terrifying. At the very least, he had to take it seriously. With a slight movement of his hands, a pair of dark golden gloves appeared in Yuan Tong's hands. The surface of the dark golden gloves was densely covered in black spikes that were a few centimeters long. Under the illumination of the sun, the glove flickered with a ghastly glow that terrified the soul. It's the martial god gloves. As he gazed at the dark gold gloves that Yuan Tong had withdrawn, Yu Heng's expression changed as he said, according to rumor, the martial god gloves were refined from the bones of 999 exalt rank dark beasts. Not only is it extremely sharp and difficult to be harmed by dark treasures, but rumors also say that the incomplete soul of an exalt realm dark beast resides within it. That's a heaven rank dark treasure. Su Qingshi suddenly interrupted Yu Heng and asked this question. Yu Heng shook his head and said, even though it isn't a heaven rank dark treasure, it isn't too far away from one. When he spoke up to here, Yu Heng suddenly laughed bitterly and said, in Yuan Tong's hands, these gloves are simply like adding wings to a tiger. Alas. Even though he didn't like Yang Yi at this moment, he hoped that Yang Yi could win because the outcome of the battle was related to the benefits the sword sect would obtain. After he wore the gloves, Yuan Tong said slowly, since I, Yuan Tong, started cultivating until now, there has never been a profounder at the same realm of cultivation that could make me withdraw this pair of gloves. Yang Yi, needless to say, you should feel proud of yourself. Yang Yi didn't say anything. With a command in his heart, the sword formation that had accumulated strength in midair for a long time suddenly stabbed directly downward at Yuan Tong. Moreover, their speed was so swift that it was astounding. At the same time, Yang Ye's left hand moved slightly, and the hidden sword shot swiftly and silently towards Yuan Tong. Yang Yi really didn't hold back at all when facing this extraordinary genius. As he gazed at the sword formation that stabbed straight down toward him, a wisp of a ferocious expression flashed in Yuan Tong's eyes. He suddenly stomped with his right foot, and his figure shot out explosively. The profound energy within his body flowed slightly, causing the dark golden gloves to instantly seem as if they'd come to life, and the spikes on them actually started moving gradually. Fuck off! Yuan Tong shouted fiercely while he smashed his fists towards the 36 swords. Space instantly shook before the energy from his fist blasted out. Everywhere it passed, ripples arose in space, and the sound of air exploding resounded incessantly wherever the ripples passed. Third-level fist intent. When they witnessed this scene, the expressions on Yu Heng and Su Qingshi's faces had changed violently. Yuan Tong actually is an existence that has the legendary ability to possess dual intent. Yuan Tong really does possess extraordinary natural talent, Li Si said in a low voice. Not only has he comprehended battle intent, but he has also comprehended fist intent. The most terrifying aspect of it all is that he has actually raised these intents to the 4th and 3rd level respectively. If he's given the time to grow, then he'll probably reign invincible throughout the world, just like the founding ancestor of the Sword Sect had all those years ago. When he spoke up to hear, Li Si gazed at Yang Yi, and then he shook his head and said, "What a pity! Yang Yi should have been the most dazzling existence. Unfortunately, he's bound to serve as contrast for Yuan Tong now." How unfortunate! In midair, the force from Yuan Tong's fists had just collided with Yang Ye's sword formation when the formation was instantly blasted apart, causing numerous swords to be blasted towards the surroundings. However, right at this moment, Yuan Tong's pupils had suddenly constricted, and he practically acted out of instinct as he suddenly smashed his right fist towards his left. Bang! The sound of metal colliding resounded. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Yang Yi shook his heart with slight regret when he saw that the hidden sword had failed to take Yuan Tong by surprise. Yuan Tong really isn't someone that trash like Qin Yuan can compare to. He was actually able to notice the hidden sword while under such circumstances. Such awareness of danger is truly too formidable. After he blasted the hidden sword back with a single punch, Yuan Tong's expression became slightly more solemn. He gazed at Yang Yi as he said in a low voice, "Qin Yuan perished at the hands of this strange sword and sword control technique of yours, right?" Yang Yi nodded and he said, "Unfortunately, it seems to be useless against you." Yuan Tong laughed coldly and said, "Yang Yi, if your trump card is merely this sword formation and that technique of sword control, then you'll have to die here today." Yang Yi nodded, and then he took a step forward before he gestured towards both sides with his hands. At the same time, he shouted, "Swords, come to me." As soon as he finished speaking, an extremely shocking scene suddenly appeared. So long as they had a sword with them, the swords of all the profounders below the arena had suddenly erupted with a sword howl, and then they transformed into a ray of light that shot violently towards Yang Yi. Sword after sword flew towards Yang Yi, and in less than a breath of time, a few thousand swords had appeared in the sky above Yang Yi. It was an extremely magnificent scene. On the walls of the Imperial Palace, the green darkness sword in Su Qingshi's possession had trembled slightly as well, and then it suddenly struggled free of Su Qingshi's control and transformed into a green streak that shot towards Yang Yi. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. At this moment, Qin Yunzi's expression was slightly unsightly and solemn, because even his own sword had started to tremble slightly just now, and if he hadn't suppressed it, even his sword would have probably obeyed Yang Ye's summon. If Qin Yunzi's expression was merely unsightly, then Kaifeng's expression was extremely unsightly, because she noticed that up until this very moment, she'd been constantly underestimating Yang Yi by too much. What a mysterious and profound technique of sword control. Li Si sighed with praise. This technique of sword control is truly peerlessly profound, especially when it's utilized at the hands of Yang Yi, who has comprehended sword intent. Its might and traits have even been fully brought to life. However, the Sword Sect doesn't seem to possess this technique of sword control. Looks like this Yang Yi is a person that possesses karmic luck as well. All of us have underestimated him. Bai Qi suddenly spoke from the side. Li Si nodded lightly to display his agreement. On the battlefield, Yuan Tong's expression had turned slightly more solemn again, while he gazed at the dense expanse of swords that covered the sky. The quality of all these swords wasn't very high, but when they were enhanced by the sword intent that Yang Yi possessed and controlled by Yang Ye's shocking technique of sword control, these swords had instantly become terrifying. Even he had no choice but to fear swords that were enhanced by 4th-level sword intent. Yuan Tong took a deep breath before he took a step forward, and the ground that he stepped on instantly cracked apart. He raised his hands slightly, and a violent gale instantly appeared out of thin air. After that, he flipped his right palm downward while the profound energy in his body started to surge violently, and the terrifying energy flowing within his right palm actually caused the space around his palm to faintly show signs of warping. It seemed like the space there would explode into pieces at any moment. At a certain moment in time, Yang Yi issued a command in his heart, and the 36 profound rank swords that floated in midair transformed into 36 rays of golden light that seemed to have torn through space as they shot down in single file. It was like a shooting star was descending from the heavens, and it emanated a golden glow of the sword as it shot explosively towards Yuan Tong. At the same time, the thousands of swords that floated in the air transformed into countless streaks that shot down towards Yuan Tong with shocking impetus. As he gazed at the dense expanse of swords that were shooting towards him, Yuan Tong took another step forward. In the next moment, he suddenly flipped his palm upward, and then swiftly smashed it forward. Heaven-split palm! Along with a grim shout from Yuan Tong, an enormous palm print formed from energy appeared in front of Yuan Tong. The enormous energy palm carried extremely terrifying might as it blasted forward towards the dense expanse of swords. Under the gazes of everyone in the surroundings, the enormous energy palm collided violently with the dense expanse of swords that were under Yang Ye's control. After a moment of silence, an enormous bang resounded like a thunderclap, and then layer after layer of waves of energy swept out incessantly from the point of collision. Everywhere these waves of energy passed, the harm limestone that paved the ground was instantly blasted up into the air. The entire surroundings were in a mess. On the other hand, those profounders around the arena were ceaselessly retreating backward at this moment because the wave of energy hadn't stopped, and it was even sweeping swiftly towards them. Right when the wave of energy was about to hit the spectators, Li Si appeared here once more, and he waved his right hand lightly as he gazed at the terrifying wave of energy that was sweeping over, causing the waves of energy to instantly and mysteriously vanish on the spot. After that, he shot a glance at Yang Yi and Yuan Tong before his figure flashed and vanished on the spot. After the wave of energy vanished, all the spectators recovered from their shock, and then they hurriedly gazed at Yang Yi and Yuan Tong. At this moment, both Yang Yi and Yuan Tong were in a slightly embarrassing state. The terrifying wave of energy had caused their clothes to be in rags. Especially Yuan Tong because countless dense marks of the sword had appeared on the clothes he wore. Even though it was like that, Yuan Tong hadn't suffered any material harm. Yang Yi hadn't suffered any material harm as well. Of course, it was because his physical defenses were formidable. As he gazed at the dense marks of the sword that covered his clothes, Yuan Tong's expression became unsightly. He raised his head to gaze at Yang Yi before he said, "Since I advanced into the first heaven realm, it's the first time a profounder at the same realm of cultivation has put me in such an embarrassing state. Needless to say, you've succeeded in infuriating me. You'll pay for this with your life." Yang Ye's brows raised as he said, "Why don't you give it a try?" Yuan Tong's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard this, and then killing intent flashed within them. After that, he took a step forward, and the ground that he stepped on instantly split apart while he raised his hands. Suddenly, a violent gale appeared out of thin air. At the same time, his body suddenly seemed like a vortex, and it made the energy in the surrounding world to start surging towards him without end. He's drawing upon the energy of the heavens and the earth. It's a heaven rank technique. My God! Yuan Tong actually intends to execute a heaven rank technique. Someone amongst the spectators in the surroundings had cried out involuntarily upon witnessing this scene. On the wall of the imperial palace, the frown on Qing Yunzi's face had eased up, and it wasn't covered in worry anymore. He smiled as he said in a low voice, "This Yang Yi really is pretty strong to be able to force Yuan Tong to execute a heaven-rank technique of my origin school." On the other hand, Kai Feng smiled without trying to cover it up at all. A heaven-rank technique. That isn't something an earth-rank technique can compare to. Yang Yi is definitely dead this time. Yu Heng and Su Qingshi frowned simultaneously instead. They were naturally aware of the might possessed by a heaven-rank technique, and it was countless times stronger than an earth-rank technique. So, how could Yang Yi resist a heaven-rank technique? The energy around Yuan Tong grew denser and denser. In the end, it actually seemed material. Yuan Tong roared with laughter, and then he gazed at Yang Yi who stood in front of him and said, "Yang Yi, receive a move of mine as well." As soon as he finished speaking, Yuan Tong took another step forward, and then he raised his right hand and pointed a finger towards Yang Yi. Calamity point. As soon as he spoke, the clouds in the sky above the square had suddenly started roiling, and then a few bolts of lightning suddenly appeared amidst the clouds. Subsequently, an extremely enormous finger gradually appeared from within the clouds, and the others in the surroundings couldn't help but tremble at the instant that this enormous finger appeared. As he gazed at the enormous finger, Yang Ye's expression had turned extraordinarily solemn. He was able to sense the terrifying energy contained within the enormous finger. Even if his physical body had been cultivated to an inconceivable state, he would probably be transformed into mush if he was struck by this enormous finger. As she gazed at the enormous finger appearing from the clouds, Xianxia's beautiful brows had knit together, and her fair finger trembled slightly while the profound energy within her body had started to circulate swiftly. Qing Yunzi seemed to have sensed the unusual movement of profound energy within Xianxia, and he glanced at her before the profound energy within his body started circulating as well. Even though Yang Yi wasn't a match for Yuan Tong, if he were to fall into the Sword Sect's hands, then the Sword Sect would definitely be able to rise to prominence in the future. So, he felt that it was best for Yang Yi to die. Should we rescue him? Bai Qi gazed at Yang Yi as he spoke in a low voice. A wisp of hesitation flashed in Li Si's eyes, but he shook his head in the end, and he said, "Fourth-level sword intent while below the age of 20. He can really be considered as a genius in the sword Dao. However, it's insufficient to make us break the rules for him. As I said before, our Grand Qin Empire will definitely save him if he's able to obtain the first position on the Ascension rankings." Bai Qi shook his head lightly and said, "This heaven rank technique isn't something he can resist, unless he possesses a heaven rank technique as well. However, he still hasn't executed one until now." Obviously, he doesn't. Li Si didn't say anything else. On the battlefield, the extremely enormous finger carried terrifying might and emanated immense pressure as it descended straight down towards Yang Yi. Because the energy contained within it was truly too terrifying, the ground around Yang Yi had actually started to collapse inch by inch when it was over 100 m away from the ground. On the other hand, as the target of the enormous finger, Yang Yi had actually slowly closed his eyes at this moment. The countless spectators in the surroundings were stunned when they witnessed this scene. Does Yang Yi intend to surrender? Even if he wants to surrender, he should shout that he admits defeat and not act in this way. Could it be that he wants to throw his life away? Under the puzzled and bewildered gazes of countless others in the surroundings, the enormous finger arrived less than 3 m above Yang Yi. Right at this moment, Yang Ye's eyes suddenly opened, and 2 sword lights flashed in the depths of them. At the same time, Yang Yi drew his sword and stabbed it directly at the enormous finger, causing a golden strand of sword qi to shoot out explosively. "Break!" Along with this loud shout from Yang Yi, the golden strand of sword qi had instantly shot at the center of the enormous finger, and then it shook slightly under the astounded gazes of everyone. After that, a bang resounded as the enormous finger exploded apart. Everyone was dumbstruck. A heaven rank technique was destroyed just like that? That's a heaven rank technique. A heaven rank technique. But it vanished with a casual wave of Yang Ye's hand? At this moment, the minds of countless people had gone blank. On the walls of the imperial palace, all the great figures there had frowned. Obviously, even they couldn't figure out how Yang Yi had destroyed the heaven rank technique with a single strike of his sword. At this moment, Li Si and Bai Qi had frowned as well, because destroying a heaven rank technique with a single strike of the sword was really too unusual. How did Yang Yi accomplish this? Countless people were thinking about this very question right now. At this moment, Yuan Tong had frowned as well, and his eyes were filled with a puzzled and bewildered expression. He was naturally clearly aware of the might possessed by a heaven rank technique. It was exactly because he was clearly aware of it that he was even more puzzled and bewildered, because even a peak king realm expert was very likely to be instantly annihilated by a heaven rank technique. However, such a technique had been destroyed by a single strike of Yang Ye's sword. Yuan Tong let out a light breath of air, flipped his palm, and then swiftly pushed it toward Yang Yi. Heaven split palm. As soon as he finished speaking, an enormous energy palm whistled through the air and left behind a string of explosions as it shot violently towards Yang Yi. There was no emotion on Yang Yi's face as he gazed at the earth rank technique, heaven split palm, that was shooting towards him, and he suddenly drew his sword and slashed when it was merely 3 m away from him. Break! The strange scene from before had appeared once more. Under the astounded and puzzled gazes of everyone in the surroundings, the enormous and terrifying energy palm had suddenly exploded with a bang, and then it dispersed and vanished in midair. What exactly is going on? Is Yang Yi cheating? Why can a simple strike of his sword destroy earth rank and heaven rank techniques? There's definitely something fishy about this. Exactly. Doesn't Yang Yi possess a mysterious king rank dark beast? Could it be that it's lending him a hand? It's definitely like that. Otherwise, how could Yang Yi be so formidable to destroy a heaven rank technique with a single strike of his sword? Does he think he's the Sword Emperor? Countless people started discussing animatedly in the surroundings. On the other hand, the brows of the great figures on the walls of the imperial palace had knit together even more tightly, and then puzzled expressions in their eyes had grown denser. Because this scene was truly too mysterious. Their instinct told them that the mysterious king-rank dark beast in Yang Yi's position hadn't lent Yang Yi a hand, because if it had, then they would have definitely been able to sense it with the strengths they possessed. It was exactly because of this that they felt even more puzzled and bewildered. Li Si was staring fixedly at Yang Yi as if he wanted to see through Yang Yi. Earlier, he'd been constantly recollecting the scene from before when Yang Yi had swung his sword, because Li Si wanted to determine if Yang Yi had relied on any external sources of strength. However, the facts told him that Yang Yi hadn't relied on any external sources of strength. It was exactly because of this that Li Si's mind was filled with bewilderment. How exactly did Yang Yi destroy an earth rank and heaven rank technique with a single strike of his sword? It wasn't just Li Si. Many others were trying to guess the answer as well, and they'd thought of countless possibilities. However, none of them had thought of the enlightened sword heart. Because in the 10,000 years of history of the Southern Territory, the number of people who'd attained the enlightened sword heart could be counted with a single hand. Every one of these people was the Sword Emperor of their time. They were extraordinary experts that reigned supreme over a generation. So, how could Yang Yi be compared to such figures? So, no one in the surroundings had thought that Yang Yi possessed the enlightened sword heart. At this moment, Yuan Tong's expression was slightly unsightly. Yang Yi had destroyed a heaven rank and earth rank technique he executed with a single strike of the sword, and this was undoubtedly like a slap to his face. Even though he really wondered how exactly Yang Yi had accomplished this, he felt even more rage at this moment. Yuan Tong took another step forward while the small amount of profound energy that was left within his body had started to surge violently. He gazed at Yang Yi and said with a slightly savage tone, "Yang Yi, I don't believe you're so mysterious. Receive a few more moves of mine, and let me see if you really can destroy all of them with a single strike of your sword." As soon as he finished speaking, Yuan Tong lightly tapped his right foot on the ground and instantly soared up into the sky. In midair, Yuan Tong moved about swiftly, and then numerous terrifying combat techniques covered the heavens and the earth as they enveloped down towards Yang Yi. Heaven split palm. Break. Earth shatter. Break. The enlightened king's seal. Break. On the battlefield, every single combat technique that Yuan Tong executed was destroyed by a single strike of Yang Yi's sword. As they watched such a scene, all the spectators in the surroundings seemed to have been petrified on the spot, and their eyes were filled with shock and bewilderment. Qin Yunzi's brows were knit together tightly. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes opened wide. At the same time, he suddenly clenched his fists tightly while his eyes were filled with astonishment, and he said with a slightly trembling voice, "Enlightened, enlightened sword heart." At this moment, it wasn't just Qin Yunzi who'd thought of this. The members of all the other 5 great powers and both Li Si and Bai Qi from the Grand Qin Empire had thought of it as well.